Hi folks, so here is that video looking at Venus's transit through Pisces and Aries and through Venus retrograde to the best that I want to focus on it now. Yesterday we talked about Mars and I gave you an overview and I mentioned that we've got to look at the first 4 months of 2025 as one blob. It almost makes no sense to look at things from a calendar month perspective because when I do my weekly overviews, I'm going to ground us in the here and now because that is what we're going to need. But it's almost pointless navigating January, February, March, and April without having a sense of the overall architecture of the month. And while in January, it is the month of Capricorn, and February will be the month of Aquarius. By the time we get to March and April, the concentration of energies in Pisces and Aries will become really intense. And indeed, Venus has already entered Pisces. And on the 18th, when Venus enters her shadow period, because she's going to go retrograde on March the 1st in Aries and then back into Pisces, she starts that shadow period sojourn with a conjunction with Saturn. And that conjunction with Saturn, Venus conjuncting Saturn, is a very important conjunction for that first quarter, for this coming up first quarter. And, you might be inclined to say, well, Venus doesn't go retrograde till March the 1st, so we don't need to worry about it. But it's not so much about worrying something or not worrying something as much as it's about understanding just how intensely, as we get into the first 3 or 4 months of this year, a series of conjunctions are building in the Pisces part of the chart between Saturn, Neptune, and the North Node, but also then Venus and Mercury and the Sun. And when I look at, for example, when I look ahead to the full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo on March the 13th, and the week before and after January 13th, which starts next week, has an important resonance there. You've got the full moon lunar eclipse of March the 13th trining Uranus, so wanting to make a go and move towards something that feels right for us and is expansive, but is faced down by Saturn, the Sun, the North Node, and also Neptune is only 6 degrees away. That's an intense full moon lunar eclipse, and these next couple of weeks, for some people, are going to feel that eclipse over the next 2 weeks. So it is time to continue to understand the architecture of the next 4 months. We started that process yesterday, where I gave you a broad overview of what is building. And we focused on Mars's retrograde. And I talked about the fact that while there's an intensity, where's the intensity building? The intensity is building in the Pisces part of the chart, where whatever crisis has been brewing in the sign of Pisces since 2012, peaking in 2014, 15, 16, 17, starting to gain some structure and clarity since March 2023. Now in 2025, it really, especially the first 5 months of 2025, and the bulk of the activity will be between now and the end of April, wants resolution and structure and boundaries. It wants you to stop the bleeding. It wants you to stop the fogginess. If you are thinking of artistic, spiritual, Piscean, Neptunian goals, then to structure those. And if you've been dealing with Neptunian fogginess and inability to put some structure or responsibility behind your obligations in the Pisces part of the chart, or you've been dealing with deception or gaslighting, or you've been doing playing the cards close to the chest, the next 3 or 4 months is going to accelerate through external events and interventions and responsibilities and people and situations knocking on your door, and your own desire to start to get on top of things with the recognition. As I said, we are now starting next week entering a period where the status quo and inertia are simply not going to be an option. They've been a reality from March 23 April of 23 till November 24. And now, especially starting next week, it is just game on. You've got to start building and constructing your reality by focusing on building the new, but also dealing with the energy, financial, emotional leaks of the past, which have been building for too long. And Venus, remember that what Venus does. Now, first and foremost, let me not forget this, and you're going to be hearing this through all my videos in January. If you're interested in me doing a reading for 2025 and how it affects your birth chart, then use the email address in the description box below to reach out to me. I am offering that reading at a discount. I can share the rates with you based on your geography, where you live. So if you want to start that conversation to get a sense of rates, use the email address below. And part of the reason for that is because what my offerings are vary by country and how I can offer what I offer. So, and I don't want to be unfair. Anyway, just use my email address in the description box below if you're interested in that kind of a reading. Now, Venus, as I've mentioned to you before, wherever she goes, is fundamentally asking the question, how can we bring matters related to the house I am transiting into alignment with what you value and what your values are? Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to build? And are your resources and relationships, your manifestations, what is actually occurring in this part of the chart that I'm transiting, in alignment with what you're trying to build and what you value and what you're seeking to protect, and which direction you're trying to move in? Financial alignment. Are your resources and your relationships working for you, or are you having to work really hard to manage energy leaks around resources and relationships that are not in alignment with you? And Venus retrograde, March the 1st to April 13th, is that transit that is all about, it is notoriously a transit of poverty and abstinence and, gosh, what is the word? It'll come to me. The word that we use when we have to tighten our belts. Let's just say reviewing our resources and our finances and our expenses. If you're trying to move in a certain direction and a lot of your expenses are going into, now I'm being a little facetious here, but bear with me with this argument. Our expenses sometimes just kind of expand and take on a life of their own, especially when resources are coming in. We have all these subscriptions to all these streaming channels, and the dry cleaning expenses are what they are, and this money's being going in, this money's going in. When Venus goes retrograde, she's like, let me just affect your financial flow so that you can actually look at, are your resources working for you, or are you working and spinning around trying to keep up with your expenses? And in the meantime, are your resources aligned in the way that they're being utilized and capitalized on and managed so that they are supporting where you want to go? And the same question is asked of relationships. And everything is starting to build towards this Venus and Mercury retrograde. Mercury goes retrograde on March the 15th. So if Venus is retrograde between March 2nd and April 13th, Mercury is retrograde within that window between March 15th and April the 7th. And Mercury's retrograde is much more about the Aries part of the chart, the house occupied by Aries, whereas Venus's retrograde is much more about the Pisces part of the chart. They occur at the same time. And when we look at the chart for the full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo on March the 13th, and the next 2 weeks are kind of gonna, on that day we have a stationary Mercury and a retrograde Venus, and they have just met up 2 days before. So it's almost like any communications, any plans, any transactions related to the Aries part of the chart comes to a halt by March the 10th, 11th, March 11th through 13th. And from that point on, until both Venus and Mercury are direct and out of Pisces by the middle of April, it is back to cleaning up the Pisces part of the chart. And once all of this is done and we enter May, Saturn leaves Pisces to go catch Neptune's tail in Aries, and then they both come back into Pisces in September and wrap up what they're going to wrap up, and then leave once and for all into Aries by January, February of 26. Neptune actually enters Aries pretty soon on March the 30th. Now, essentially, when we look at Venus, the Venus cycle in Aries, here are some dates that I'm going to give you for those of you who like dates. Venus conjuncts Saturn January the 18th. She then conjuncts Neptune on February the 1st. Basically, the conjunctions that Venus is going to make are with Saturn, Neptune, and the North Node. Those conjunctions are going to be made 3 times during her shadow and retrograde period between January the 18th and May the 26th. And it is Venus conjunct Saturn on January 18th, April 7th, April 24th that are the pivotal, those are the conjunctions. I mean, there is no more, let's look at your relationships and look at your resources and start the process of managing those responsibilities as responsibly as possible than Venus conjunct Saturn. By the time, as I've been mentioning to you, we get to the full moon in Cancer in a little over a week's time, it's game on. We're feeling the pressure. And the next 2 weeks, insofar as there's a resonance with the Virgo full moon lunar eclipse on March the 13th, that lunar eclipse is basically saying, I understand you want to make a bid for freedom, and I understand that you want to make a bid for the right path for you in the Taurus part of your chart. But what are you going to do about the building obligations in the Pisces part of your chart? What are you going to do to stabilize the Pisces part of your chart? And we've been talking about this all through 23 into 24, and here we are. And this is when it counts. January, February, March, April. When you look at the tarot cards for these months, for January, we've got the Wheel of Fortune. For February, we've got the Justice card. For March, we've got the Hanged Man. When Venus and Mercury go retrograde, there's an air of suspension. I don't think it's nearly as inactive as all that, but there's a pause. And then when you look at April, it's the Death card. And by the time you get to May, we go back to the Hierophant. For whoever, so again, Wheel of Fortune, Justice, Hanged Man, Death, which is the same card as Transformation. January, February, March, April. I would want you to take advantage of Venus being in Pisces over the next week or so that if there are communications or if there are bridges you want to build, or if you do want to reach out to start conversations around stabilizing the Pisces part of the chart, I would do it sooner rather than later. Because as you get towards that Jan 18th date with Venus conjuncting Saturn, it's likely that things are going to become, around that date, things are just going to become intense. So I almost feel like by January the 10th, 6th, 7th, 8th, go ahead and initiate this process of consciously starting to bring the Pisces part of the chart into alignment. Jan the 18th, Venus conjunct Saturn. February 1st, Venus will conjunct Neptune. March the 11th, when Venus is retrograde and Mercury is still direct, as I said, they will conjunct in Aries. As if to say, let's have a conversation about where we're going, but we're both now going to turn back and clean up the Pisces part of the chart one more time and come back around. And then Venus retrograde conjuncts the Sun on March the 22nd. In Pisces. March the 27th, retrograde Venus conjuncts Neptune. Actually, that Venus-Sun conjunction is so interesting. It's right on the cusp of Pisces and Aries. And on April the 7th, she conjuncts Saturn. On April the 13th, she goes direct. On April the 24th, she conjuncts Saturn again. And conjuncts Neptune on May the 2nd for the final time. I mean, she starts off the shadow period conjuncting Saturn on the 18th. She ends her entire retrograde and going direct by conjuncting Saturn again on April the 24th. And between that first conjunction on Jan the 18th and April the 24th, the third conjunction is when you will find that your resources and relationships and challenges related to the Pisces part of the chart are going to hit a kind of operatic need for stabilization. It's not as if opportunities for future growth are not there. The Capricorn new moon at the end of December and the Aquarius new moon, which trines Jupiter and Gemini at the end of January, both offer promise. Even the full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo on March the 13th is trine Uranus and Taurus. I'm opening gateways for forward movement, but can you please stabilize everything that is an energetic or a financial leak? And that axis with the Mercury retrograde in December around Sagittarius and Gemini opposing each other and squaring Pisces remains active, not so much from a Sagittarius part of the chart, but with Jupiter squaring Saturn. Jupiter retrograde in Gemini squaring all these planets going through Pisces. It's very much part of the question. I have here with me sort of the lunation charts for the Aquarius new moon, the Leo new moon. I don't want to get overly, the Pisces new moon. Again, the Pisces new moon. By the time we get to the Pisces new moon, we've got Mercury conjuncting both the North Node and Neptune. But squaring Jupiter, again, there's an opportunity for cleanup. By the time we get to the middle, by the time it's the eclipses, and the March 29th Aries solar eclipse is so interesting because, yes, you have the eclipse occurring at 9 degrees of Aries, but at that time, on the 29th of March, you have Mercury inching back into Pisces, conjuncting Neptune, and Venus was also retrograde, separating, getting ready to conjunct the North Node, and Saturn. Indeed, the conjunctions in Pisces are strongest at the end of March. We've got Saturn, the North Node, Venus, Neptune, and Mercury, all within 6 degrees of each other. That is what we're heading towards. From that point on, the Aries new moon solar eclipse to the end of April, it's all about make sure that the plans are being put in place so that we can move forward. Why am I bringing all this up now? I'm bringing all this up now because, as I said, you can't lose sight of everything for the first 4 months of this year is about create the change that you want to create so that you can move in the direction that you want to, symbolized by the Aries North Node eclipses, Uranus in Taurus, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on April 20th of 24, which the impact of which is going to be felt all the way to, let's just say, the end of the first week of June. Jupiter creating his endings and new beginnings all the way to the end of the first week of June of 2025. You want to end up in the new by that time. You're going to have to use these first 4 months of the year to actively roll up your sleeves and stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. And the Venus and Mercury retrogrades are essential. And while January and February are given over to Mars's retrograde, and I covered that in yesterday's video, this video is meant to accompany yesterday's video for an overall architecture of the first 4 months of this year. Ultimately, crap hits the fan with Venus leading the way in Pisces. Venus is the first of the personal planets to enter Pisces. She conjuncts Saturn on January the 18th. We are not waiting till March to be in conversations. Venus's retrograde And even Mercury's upcoming retrograde through Aries and Pisces is going to make its presence felt by the Cancer full moon in the middle of this month, when Venus's conjunction with Saturn is going to be encoded in that full moon. Next week and the week after that, around the Cancer full moon, may feel eclipsy, may feel like, all right, it's like you're lined up for that race that's going to take you from here to the end of April. And on January the 6th, you get the sound of the crack of the whip or the shot that starts the race. Alignment, alignment, alignment. What are you building? What are you sorting out? How are you sorting out? Everything that you have wanted to do and move in 2023 and for much of 2024 is going to want to move in the next 4 months. And inertia is no longer an option. And I think a lot of us can feel it. Where moving forward seemed to be a really difficult time in 23 and 24 in some respects, now it's inertia that is, now it's all about movement. And through this process, the fact that Mars in Cancer is going to be trining all these planets going through Pisces and even into Aries when Mars comes into Leo is meant to indicate that if you do the work, the universe will try and support you and take care of you. I do think that there are going to be some, conjunctions with Saturn, with the North Node and Saturn and Neptune becoming closer and closer to, as you head towards the end of March, depending on how actively you've been able to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. If you have not, conjunctions with Saturn are going to feel pressure filled. But we often need the pressure in order to take the right action. It's like, don't knock resistance. Don't knock misfortune. Don't knock things not going your way. Don't knock the intense call for responsibly stabilizing the Pisces part of the chart, because it is needed, it is essential, and progress is on the other side of this work that we're going to be doing between now and the end of April. And as I said, it's not as if there are no opportunities connecting to you to the future during this time. The real intensity starts to hit. We're going to feel the intensity over the next 2 weeks. And then after that, as Venus moves past Saturn and starts to move towards Neptune and the North Node, in February, we're really going to start to feel more the month of Aquarius. But by the time we get to March, by the time we get to that Pisces new moon on February the 27th, it's just February the 27th, Pisces new moon, 4:44 p.m. Pacific time. Neptune, North Node, direct Mercury conjuncting them. Mercury just having conjunct Saturn, the new moon in Pisces. Yeah, I think I've given you a sense. I have given you a sense already between yesterday's video and today's video of a broad sense of the architecture between now and the end of April. It is one time period, and the intensity for it starts on the 6th. Tomorrow, I'm going to do the weekly overview, and that it's very hard for me to conceive of doing any overviews without giving you the structure between yesterday and today, so that I can at least point to these and say, this is where we're going, this is where we're headed, this is what the overall architecture of the time looks like. I know there are more dates I need to give you when the North Node and Neptune and Saturn all conjuncting and all that kind of stuff, and we will continue. But the dates, all of this is going to become closer and closer and closer. The North Node and Neptune are already conjunct. The exact dates are far less relevant than the actual energy and the interpretation. And there's more. I need to talk about Mercury's retrograde. I need to talk about the North Node and Neptune conjunct. 2 points that are almost given a similarly mischievously foggy, confusing, delusional, although I don't think that is the case, but that can be our experience of both the North Node and Neptune interpretation in certain traditions. So all of that is going to follow. Right now, I just want you to digest yesterday's video and this particular video for a sense of the overall architecture. I want you to think about what needs to be done in the house occupied by Pisces in your chart to stabilize it. What do you need to do to responsibly bring that part of the chart into alignment? I want you to think about and contemplate the direction that you want to move in, but I want you to recognize that the next 3 or 4 months is going to have a roll up our sleeves. Austerity, that is the word. Austerity. Venus retrograde, March 1st to April the 13th, is a transit of austerity. But the spirit of austerity and harnessing and bringing everything into alignment with where we want to go, in sorting out what we want to sort out, giving ourselves the liberty and the freedom to pursue what we want, these next 4 months is that's what it's about. Alignment, no excess, no waste. In the weekly overview tomorrow, I'm going to look at the week ahead. And having done these videos, it gives me a sense of, as I talk about, I'm going to bring us back to the here and now, because with these overviews, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that January is still the month of Capricorn, and it's the Capricorn part of the chart, and we're moving towards the trines to Uranus and blah, blah, blah. And, you can't, through the overall architecture, we still need to be grounded in what's going on now. But I can only hook what is going on now to the overall architecture, having done yesterday's and today's videos. All right, enough. If you are interested in getting a reading with me, a normal reading or a look at your birth chart with the transits that are important for this time, if you want me to do a reading looking at 2025 and its connection to your birth chart, or you have a single topic 30 to 40 minute reading request, please use the email address in the description box below to get in touch with me, and I can let you know rates and all that good stuff that comes with that. If you like or find the content I'm sharing useful, feel free to share information about my channel with friends and other people who might find this content useful. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already. Next to the subscribe button is a bell icon. Hover over that, there's a wiggly bell on top. Click on that and you'll be notified when I do new videos. There is a thanks button underneath this video that you can use to contribute to the channel. You can contribute to this channel for free by leaving a comment if you feel so inclined, or liking this video. It gives it greater circulation on YouTube. Thank you for bearing with me between yesterday and today. As I said to you, I've been struggling with how do I organize the information related to these 4 months in such a way that we can work through everything that we're going to be needing to and trying to work through over the next 3 or 4 months. And at least we've got these to refer back to. And at least now you have a sense of where things are going and where the priorities are. And if you're already feeling them, at least hopefully you'll have a sense of you're not going crazy, that it's mirrored somewhere. As we head towards the 6th, 7th, 8th of January, just remember that if there are outstanding communications that will help you bring the Sagittarius part of your chart into alignment with where you're trying to go based on that Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius between November 26th to December the 15th, then you might feel the importance of the prioritization to get that taken care of over the next 3 or 4 days as well. I'll cover that more in tomorrow's weekly overview. All right, talk to you guys soon.